Imagine this! It's the tail end of summer and you're out with your Dead by Daylight obsessed friend. You guys just talking about recent perks with the topic suddenly shifting to hexes. Well, I don't have to imagine, cause this actually happened like 4 or 5 months ago. The gist of this video is quite simple. Most hex perks in Dead by Daylight need a rework. That is the TLDR. Now, in more detail, my friend and I talked about how hexes are glass cannons. Most of them are real strong, but weak at the same time. Yes, their effects are some of the strongest in the game, most of the time, but also they can be snuffed out in a second. You might be thinking, hey dumbass, you ain't saying anything new, and to that I say, I know. But it seems like even behavior agrees with this point, as the last few hex perks have been different. This new generation of hex perks are either earned or temporary. Pentimento and plating require some work to activate, but even if they get snuffed, you can make more. Face the Darkness is like a quick time event. It appears for as long as the killer gets use of it, making it way harder to get rid of. The newest hex, 2 can play, is more of a catch-up perk, giving you a little boost to deal with annoyances. The idea here is that not only are hexes a bit more interactive, but they're also not just a one and done. Having said all of that, going back to my story, my friend and I went on to think of reworks for all hex perks. This video is about them. Well, not quite, cause I can't be 100% sure I remember all our ideas one to one, so these are like the revised versions. Before we start going perk by perk, let me just mention the few perks that don't really need help. Hex Pentimento, Plating, Face the Darkness, 2 can play will obviously not be touched, as they were kind of the inspiration for this video. No-Ed is also staying as it is. It's a last minute boost to try and help you so it stays. Sorry not sorry. Oh, and there will also be one non-hex perk, so why don't we start with it? Shattered Hope. You have learned the arcane ways. Shattered Hope grants hex perks the ability to treat boon totems as if they were dull, allowing them to turn hex if there is no other totem available. Additionally, while within 24, 28, 32 meters of an active boon totem, you see its aura in blue. The idea here is that while you can no longer break totems yourself, it makes boons more beneficial for you long term, as they remain empty spaces for your future hexes. Yes, this is an indirect nerf to Pentimento, but let's be honest, that perk doesn't really need help. Shattered Hope won't be the only anti-boon perk though. We also have HEX Trio of the Hunt. A hex that feeds off the survivor's attempts at retaliation. Hooking a survivor for the first time activates Hex Trio of the Hunt if it isn't active already and if there is a totem available. As long as the hex totem remains lit, being within 24 meters of a hex or blessed totem grants you a 4-5-6% haste that remains for 6 seconds after exiting the range. If the totem gets cleansed, Hex Trio of the Hunt deactivates. Mutable hexes with the same activation condition will be applied to the same totem. This is one of the bigger changes. A complete rework, you might say. Let's be honest though, for being named Trio of the Hunt, this perk's current effect really has nothing to do with hunting. This new version helps in chase and will both counter boons and mix well with other hexes. Some numbers may need to be tweaked though. I don't know, I ain't aiming for balance, plus I ain't a game designer. Let's talk about another perk now, shall we? Hex Haunted Grounds. A hex rooting its power on their futile hopes. Whenever a generator is complete, if there is a totem available, it turns hex and Haunted Grounds activates. Whenever a hex is cleansed while this perk is active, all survivors suffer from the exposed status effect for 35, 40, 45 seconds. The perk deactivates, turning its totem dull if it is still up. Multiple hexes with the same activation condition will be applied to the same totem. The quintessential trap perk. There isn't much to say here except for the fact I have reduced the exposure time to compensate for the perk activating more than once now. Oh, and this next one is also a biggie. if you ask me. Hex Ruin. A hex which prolongs the survivor's suffering. Whenever a generator is complete and Ruin is not active, if there is a Dough Totem available, it turns Hex and Ruin activates. While Ruin is active, all generators not being repaired will automatically regress at 50, 75, 100% the normal regression speed. If the totem is cleansed, Ruin deactivates. Upon 4 generators being completed, this perk will deactivate permanently. Multiple hexes with the same activation condition will be applied to the same totem. Okay, so most of this is expected, but what's with the 4-gen bullshit? Well, this is my attempt to prevent a new Skull Merchant Knight 3-gen situation with all killers. Ruin will not work if there are only 3 gens left. That's it. Otherwise, it's the same old thing, it just has more lives. So, that happened to be 2 perks that are activated by generators in a row. So why don't we talk about 2 more perks, which are now gonna utilize a new thing I have called trapped hexes. Trapped hexes essentially act like old hex totem. They are lit from the start. Their point is that these next 2 perks can't really activate unless a totem is cleansed. And you do want them to work on their own, don't you? The first one is HEX Retribution, a hex rooting itself on vengeance. At the beginning of the trial, a random Dough Totem turns into a trapped hex. If Hex Retribution is inactive and another hex totem or the trapped hex gets cleansed, the perk will activate as long as there is a Dough Totem available for it to inhabit. Upon activating for the first time, if the trapped hex remains, it will turn into a Dough Totem that may become Retribution itself if needed. While Hex Retribution is active, survivors' cleansing or blessing totems get revealed by Killer Instinct and suffer from the Oblivious status effect for 20, 25, 30 seconds. If a totem is cleansed while Retribution is active, including Retribution itself, all survivors are revealed to you for 15 seconds and suffer from the Oblivious status effect for 20, 25, 30 seconds. Cleansing or blessing Hex Retribution deactivates it. Multiple hexes with the same activation condition will be applied to the same totem. Essentially, if survivors take 1 hex away, Retribution comes in to avenge them. I did take the numbers down a notch again to make the perk itself not too oppressive and added the Killer Instinct so people who do like current Tree of the Hunt can still have their fun. The other perk that is going to utilize this new mechanic is of course Hex Undying, a hex maintaining the darkness which assists you. At the start of the trial, a random Dough Totem turns into a trapped hex. Whenever another hex gets cleansed or blessed while the trapped hex or Undying itself is up, it will turn into a normal hex totem and take the effect of the snuff totem. Whenever a hex perk other than Undying creates a hex totem and both trapped hex and Undying are in play, Undying will create a new totem of itself if a Dough Totem is available. Undying can activate up to 2, 3, 4 times. Multiple hexes with the same activation condition will be applied to the same totem. Undying is pretty much the same, except that if there isn't an Undying totem and another hex does show up, it will make a new totem of itself, as long as you've not used it too many times. However, in the wording, I tried to make sure to not enter a situation where multiple hexes activate in succession and Undying ends up filling half of your available slots. So I made sure they can be more than the trapped hex or more than 1 Undying totem at a time. Moreover, the trap hex created by Undying will be the same trapped hex created by Retribution if both are in play. The whole point of trapped hexes, as I said earlier, is that they just show up at the start. If survivors are careful, they are obvious traps, but they are needed to make sure that these 2 perks can be used on their own merits. Sort of. Enough about complicated new hex types. Let's talk about something more fun. Hex Blood Favor. The entity's favor taken form as a hex. Blood Favor begins the trial with 3 tokens. Whenever a survivor is down by any means, if Blood Favor is inactive and there is a Dough Totem available, consume 1 token to activate the perk and turn that Dough Totem hex. While Blood Favor is active. Injuring a survivor calls upon the entity to block all unused pallets within 24, 28, 32 meters for 15 seconds. If the hex is cleansed or blessed, Hex Blood Favor deactivates. Multiple hexes with the same activation condition will be applied to the same totem. So Blood Favor remains its strong self, but to ensure that it doesn't get too overpowered with the multiple lives, I've attached the token system to it. So it does have limited lives similar to Undying. Now, from something that is quite strong to something that in its current state is super weak. Hex Huntress Lullaby. A hex which haunts the survivors through the trial. Whenever you land a basic attack on a survivor, if Huntress Lullaby is inactive and there is a Doe totem available, it turns hex and the perk activates, gaining a token. Landing a basic attack while the perk is active grants another token up to 5. As long as the hex totem is up, reduce the timer between the skill check warning sound and the skill check itself by 20% per token, and survivors failing a generator or healing skill check will have their progress reduced by 5, 7.5, 10%. Cleansing or blessing the hex totem deactivates Hex Huntress Lullaby and you lose all tokens. Multiple hexes with the same activation condition will be applied to the same token. There isn't much different here. This is perhaps the easiest hex to activate and stack, so that could be considered the major buff to this perk. Though there is another perk that is easily activatable. Hex the Third Seal, a hex spreading its curse through the trial. Begin the trial with 2, 3, 4 tokens. Injuring a survivor unaffected by Hex the Third Seal will consume 1 token and light a Doe totem if there is one available. As long as the Hex totem is up, the injured survivor suffers from the blindness status effect. For the first 120 seconds after being lit, the totem can only be cleansed by the affected survivor. Multiple hexes with the same activation condition will be applied to the same totem. As you can probably see, this new version of the Third Seal takes after the design philosophy of hex plating, with the exception that it can so happen that it is applied to the same survivor twice instead of to everybody just once. This feels fair though, as blindness, while it's definitely not weak, it is nothing like Oblivious at the end of the day. We are nearing the end and boy has it been a while. Second to last, but certainly not least for you, we are offering Hex Crowd Control, a hex which eases your pursuits. As long as there is a Doe totem available, whenever a survivor performs a rushed vault action within 32 meters of you, the entity will block the window for 15 seconds and a hex totem will light up. The totem will persist for 20, 10, 0 seconds after the last affected window is unblocked and will then snuff itself out. If a survivor cleanses the totem while it's active, crowd control will deactivate permanently. Multiple hexes with the same activation condition will be applied to the same totem. Quite obviously molded after Face the Darkness, this version of crowd control is in fact a quick time event, though with a new strength and a new weakness attached to it. You see, this version of crowd control has no upper limit on how many windows it can block. However, as long as there is at least one window blocked, the perk's weak spot is exposed, making it easier for survivors to take out compared to Face the Darkness. Finally, we get to our last perk, perhaps the biggest one on this list. Hex Devour Hope, a hex which drains the last of their hopes. As long as there is a Doe totem available or Hex Devour Hope is active, whenever a survivor gets unhooked at least 24 meters away from you, Devour Hope gets a token, up to 5. Upon reaching 2 tokens, Hex Devour Hope activates, turning a Doe totem hex. While it remains in the trial, gain 3, 4, 5% haste for 10 seconds after hooking a survivor. Upon reaching 3 tokens, all survivors become exposed until the hex is cleansed or blessed. Upon reaching 5 tokens, gain the ability to kill survivors by your hand as long as the totem is not blessed or cleansed. Cleansing or blessing the Hex Totem deactivates the perk and removes all tokens. Multiple hexes with the same activation condition will be applied to the same totem. Devour Hope is one of the coolest perks in the game. Plus, it is healthy, as it does encourage leaving the hooked survivors the hell alone. This version has gained no new downsides, but it does have 2 new sweet buffs. 1. The Hex Totem doesn't appear until 2 tokens, allowing you to get some use of it before losing it. 2. You have multiple attempts at getting it. It is overpowered, probably, I don't know. Honestly, it might be, but hey, this isn't really a video demanding behavior make these changes. It's all for fun and games and imagining a world in which totems are not a one-time thing. Does that go against the idea of hex totems? I guess, but as I mentioned earlier, so do the last 4 hex totems added to the game. And with all that said, we are ready for this little waste of time to come to an end. I mean this video to come to an end. What do you think? Tell me down in the comments and let's try and make this thing into a bit of a discussion. I'd love that. Sorry for the big wait on this video. Got caught up in uni and upgrading my setup with the help of Black Friday, if you catch my drift. It doesn't really matter. Like and subscribe, maybe, if you like the video, of course. Gonna try and upload more, and not only Dead by Daylight at that, but we'll see what ends up happening. This will definitely be the last video for the year, if I even manage to get it out during 2023. At the time of recording, I have 10 days. Let's hope. For now, thank you for lasting this long. I really do appreciate it. Have a good one and hope to see you again.